yes, the density of mesh in the Central Belt is unfathomably complex, and this is just where this system. Well, in a way, it kind of doesn't work. It's too I mean, it would once you start applying rules to it. I think it would tidy itself up. But the sort of first pass is such a complexly dense mesh that it's not that useful for the purposes of this rail matter. But what I think is quite interesting is the fact that this is the following, if you like, the Green Party, the Scottish Greens' rule of 5,000 population settlements or more. Two interesting things. Number one interesting thing: no Highland mainline. The preference is actually pretty obviously for a route up the Great Glen. Which is interesting. So that's the preference of route. That is less than 100 kilometers. So this is anything. If I didn't have the 100-kilometer rule, it would obviously draw the nodes. But this is using the 100-kilometer rule. Other thing, poor old Thurso and Wick are up in isolation. There's no shorter than, it's about 110 kilometers, I think, to get up to either one of them. So that line didn't draw either. So interestingly, those are excluded. So because I think you need to have a contiguous network, I think obviously I should have broken my rule for that bit to have a connection in, and I'd pick the shorter one, and it wouldn't make much difference because there's George Mass there, lovely George Mass Junction, George Mass. So those are two quite interesting observations. The other thing is kind of how you do get this sort of density around the Black Isle, which is quite interesting, although excluding the Black Isle entirely. That's interesting. Other interesting things: the density in the northeast, which is relevant to CNER's campaign, because they're pointing out that there is a lack of connectivity. We have got there's Banchory, so there's West Hill, there's Banchory. You can see Banchory is part of that. It needs to be part of that in Eastern Haven. So you can see there's Banchory. Banchory justifies its connectivity, and yes, the network wouldn't be all these million lines. The point is that you'd have. So if we overlay the existing network, you can kind of see. The other thing that's quite interesting is that you get it's a pretty straight line connecting through. It's not too bad that connection of the the Aberdeen to Inverness line. It's kind of not okay. It's pretty weavy, but it's not too bad. Ideally, it would be more straight, but it's not too bad. Its capacity is. What might happen if you put the limit at, say, 125 kilometres? Would the Highland Main Line appear? I don't think the Highland Main Line does. Obviously, you get this connection. You get a few more connections down in the borders as well. A few more things appear down here. But no, I don't think the Highland Main Line does. I think that distance is like it's like 140. I think it's something. It's quite long. Like it's a pretty long distance. Yeah. Good question. So sorry, I've waffled a lot there, but that's I felt like an interesting. It's kind of maybe not quite as insightful as the Welsh railway map one. Other thing, the Highland Main Line and the Kyle Line, both. I'm glad they're there, and we shouldn't get rid of them. But it's interesting that they're not. These are highly loss-making railway lines, as they rightly should be, because they're there as a public service. But it's interesting that they don't. The line to Fort William connects to Fort William, justifies itself. Oban, likewise, but to Fort William, to Mallaig and to Kyle, not so much. But again, this is the situation where, a bit like we talked about with the connection between Carmarthen and Aberystwyth, there's that tourist relevance. Again, like the lines up to Pwllheli, there's that tourist relevance. There is value in having a railway to not result in congestion of sort of some pretty sensitive landscapes. So yeah, and also it's a fantastic way to tour Skye, bus is apparently not as great even as it was when I used to do this. But get on the bike, get the ferry from Mallaig with your bike up onto Skye, and then do the whole loop right the way around each of the three peninsulas is just absolutely strong, vigorous recommend. So that's the map. I think it's quite interesting. I think it's interesting that gap is interesting. Perhaps the gap up to Thurston Wick is less obvious because it's such a. It's known that it's a spectacularly. I mean, the other thing is these stations are all you wouldn't get rid of them because they're more populated than this, but they're definitely. I always think, oh come on, just connect, skip that loop and increase the journey, improve the journey times. But anyway, it's that challenge of journey times versus service provision. Anyway, I waffle. There's the map. I don't know. Was that interesting? Was it useful? Was it basically pointless? For me, some of the interesting things come in like is the next question that I can't achieve without programming, without the input of everyone on, of some of yourselves who are watching or listening, is that then taking it the next step of like, right, well, okay, if you start looking at some of those simple geometric things like angles between nodes, so if you've got a very shallow angle between nodes, nodal connectors, then you get rid of the longer one, keep the shorter one. If you apply that rule, I think even that rule alone will probably tidy it up quite a lot. I think then if you start applying some of the other things like, okay, well, if this one serves more than one node, then prioritize that one, delete the other one if there are enough within a certain band. I think with some basic geometry-based kind of connector deleting rules, I think the map would start looking more sensible more quickly.